Hello, everyone. Senator Derek Harvey here. It's 1 o'clock, so we'll get rolling here. Thanks everybody for coming. I'll be sitting in the chair today, and we have our great staff here helping us out. Aaron, if you could take the roll.
Yes, thank you. Thanks everybody for coming. So we'll go ahead and do roll call and then we'll start with the committee members and then staff can go ahead and introduce themselves. So when I call your name, if you could just say here and then just tell everybody who you represent and if you want to, a little bit about yourself. So Senator Harvey.
Here.
Okay. Bob Dean.
Here. Um, just a quick thing about me. I am a licensed plumber. I work out of Great Falls, and I am our master of record for our company.
Okay. I see Webb Brown is on the line.
We're Brown Montana Dental Association based in Helena, but actually calling in from Trout Creek, Montana today. Thanks.
Great, thank you. Okay, let's see, John Harding. How about Troy Jensen?
Hello, I'm Troy Jensen with the Board of Professional Engineers, Professional Land Surveyors, and I am a licensed surveyor and I am located in Sydney, Montana.
Thank you. Allison Paul.
Hi, I am an attorney and the executive director of Montana Legal Services Association, and we are an organization that represents people that can't afford a lawyer in civil cases.
Thank you. Jason Small.
Hello, Jason Small, Montana AFL-CIO and former legislator.
Great, thank you. Eric Strauss.
Good afternoon. Eric Strauss, the Director for the Montana Department of Corrections.
Great. And Representative Teal.
Hello. Yep. Representative Morgan Teal, House District 30 over in Richland County. I work for my company, my family's small commercial roofing business in Sydney, and I'm on the board for the Montana Roofing Association.
Great, thank you. So there's a few other people on the subcommittee that may join us. If they do, then we will let them in and they can introduce themselves. So we have for staff, I am Erin Sullivan. I'm the policy analyst with the department's legal division, and I will be the lead staff for this subcommittee as well as the full task force and any other subcommittees that the task force has. So you will get to know me very well. And then we also have our chief legal counsel, Quinlan O'Connor. Go ahead and say hello.
Sorry, I was happy to let you introduce me. I'm Quinlan O'Connor. I'm the Chief Legal Officer for the Department of Labor and Industry. Happy to provide whatever legal assistance you need or help look into things after the fact.
Thank you. And then we also have Lisa Patzer.
Hi, I'm Lisa. I am running the Zoom today, so have a great day.
Great. Okay. So that is roll call, and then yep, that's it, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Aaron. And I seem to miss my introduction there. Sorry about that. Off to a good start here. Senator Derek Harvey out of Butte, have served 4 sessions now in the legislature, 3 in the House and 1 in the Senate. Happy to be here. So next we're going to roll into item number B on our agenda. And this is where we'll get into a little bit of the task force action and start talking about issues and goals for this subcommittee. So to kick it off, we'll start with some topics from you all, from the subcommittee members, that you would like to bring forward in front of this subcommittee to be considered. So if you would raise your hand, I'll try to call on you in order if you have some issues you want to talk about. Bob, do you have some?
Yes. I think to start us off, I think if we can get some clarification on the chapters within Title 37 that we might consider falling under this construction subcategory. I think that'd be great to maybe discuss those. There's probably about 12 on there that align really well with construction. But I think input from everybody to understand which ones we would be covering or need to reach out and get more information on would be great.
Thanks, Bob. Aaron, did you kind of have that broken out at all, or?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Mr. Dean. I can take a stab at it. I'm sure Mr. O'Connor would also be able to answer that question. Obviously, the new licensing for construction contractors would definitely fall under the purview of this committee, subcommittee, and the home inspector licensing that was also moved over from Title 39 to Title 37 would as well. Anything that's trades related, and so or construction related, and so plumbers and electricians would fall under that. We also have some other ones that are a little bit smaller as far as like their programs, and so they're like construction blasting, elevator contractors, heating, ventilation, air conditioning. Those are all in Title 37, and then there's some that are in Title 50. And so those would be like boilers, boiler operators, and all of those. Those would be the ones that kind of jump out to me without really looking through them. I'm sure I missed some. And so Quinlan, if you want to jump in.
Sure, I actually think you covered them pretty well. I mean, I think the goal, as I understand it, for the subcommittee is if it seems construction related, let's have the conversation. We're looking at occupational licensing broadly, and so we want to have the conversations, and so we're happy to have them. And if it crosses over, we can carry it across multiple of the subcommittees or otherwise. And even good ideas that aren't directly occupational licensing, we can park as well. And so we'll have the conversations, and I think we'd rather go at it that way than try and say you're only allowed to talk about the following 6 chapters of the code.
Thank you, Aaron. Jason, you.
Sorry, I couldn't find my raise hand button. This is just to the process. It seems that right now people are having a hard time getting in on the Zoom link. I don't know if there's anything you can clear up on that end or change. I don't know.
So they're just not able to get in. You have some folks that aren't able to get in. Okay. Aaron, are they in the waiting room? I wonder if our little change in format is what has people kind of mixed up.
Yeah, I'll apologize. We're working through this as we go. We did set up the first couple meetings as Zoom meetings, and so you could see everybody. Everybody was kind of in one room. There seemed to be some confusion with that, and so we redid this. And so this is our first meeting as a webinar. And so if you notice that the subcommittee is all in one area, this is more like the legislative hearing. So we're the panelists, and then we have the attendees in another meeting. And Lisa she's doing an awesome job. She's letting people in. And so I see Senator Nolan has just joined us, and Kelly Lynch has just joined us. And so we are working through the kinks, and I do appreciate everybody's patience with that. With that, Senator Harvey, is it okay if we have Senator Nolan and Kelly Lynch introduce themselves to the group?
Yeah, and before we do that, I'll just clarify if you're a member of the public and not on the subcommittee, you'll stay kind of in the waiting room until we do public comment, and then you'll raise your hand and you'll get promoted in to give your public comment, and then you'll go back to the waiting room, much like if you've testified during the legislature. So. With that, Senator Nolan, if you'd like to give us a little introduction on yourself.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is Senator Mark Nolan out of the Greater Flathead Valley, covering 2 counties, Lake County and Flathead County, up in Senate District number 6. Privileged to be on this committee and with such great stalwarts as all of you that I can see online so far, and look forward to helping any way we can. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. Kelly Lynch.
Hi, everybody. Kelly Lynch. I'm the Executive Director of the Montana League of Cities and Towns. I apologize. I apparently did not have my own Zoom account. How does that even happen in this day and age? So I'm all set now. Thanks.
Thanks, Kelly. I ran into that same issue too. So we'll kick it back to any topics that the subcommittee members would like to bring forward. Jason?
Yeah, I'll bring this up as per a very large discussion the other day amongst quite a few groups. One of the glaring and key problems that they were having, and there were a few issues brought up, sorry, but one of the key problems they had was actually something the department itself could probably do, and that is to expedite and get back the completion paperwork for the apprenticeship. So once the um basically I believe might have been the plumbers or electricians, I'm not sure, but as they were wrapping up their end testing, their application or the form that they finished their apprenticeship up sent to the state, and then there's a huge lag there where they can't get their paperwork back, and it's cost a few apprenticeship opportunities here and there over the years, I guess. But apparently lately it's been a little bit more of a lag than usual. So one of the discussions we had as a group was possibly trying to implement a timeline or a trigger point in that process to make sure that the paperwork's actually getting done in a timely manner and back to everybody.
Yeah, thank you, Jason. I also heard a little bit about that, where folks were actually getting emails sent to them saying that it was delayed because they were waiting on the printer to print the forms for the certificates. And to me, I think that triggers a couple of things. I think we should look at, is that still the best way to do that process? Or in today's world, is there any way that that could become an electronic process where we're not dealing with snail mail, and we're not dealing with making sure the right paper is there for the certificates. If there's some type of authorization sign in we could do electronically to make sure everything's above board. To me, I think that would sounds like it would add a lot of efficiencies to that process. Is there anybody else that has heard that or has input on that at all? Not seeing any. We'll add that to the list to look at a little further. Any other subcommittee member topics they'd like to bring forward? Morgan Teal, representative.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think this list on the initiatives and priorities worksheet was pretty good with the member topic ideas. I had kind of mentioned in, I think, the first full task force meeting with the new contractor licensing program, this is sort of generic, but if we could kind of take a look at that and see if there's any other improvements we could do. I know it went into effect this year and people are working through maybe the new changes that come with that. And then I'd be interested in kind of reviewing the independent contractor program sort of generically. And then I don't know if we'll get into this later, but this email that was sent to us about the Montana contractors liability insurance. This gal, Mary, had some thoughts on making that better. I'd love to discuss that and see if this is a problem we could solve fairly easily. Thank you.
Yeah, that sounds good. Just to make sure, does everybody have that form that she was referencing, the initiatives and priority worksheet? Aaron sent that out on Wednesday, kind of as a packet. In that email, there was 5 different attachments. And it has a good breakdown of some different ideas along with the executive order kind of initiative worksheet that and we'll kind of dive into next there. So of those topics Representative Teal brought up, is there any secondary input from subcommittee members on those? I think those are all good things that we should add to our list to definitely look into. Any other input? Okay. Back to any topics that the subcommittee would like to bring forward. Director Strauss.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, a couple things on my mind. I brought them up in the kickoff to and we're going to likely talk about it in the barrier subcommittee, so maybe more appropriate for there, but looking broadly at apprenticeships and apprenticeshipable occupations. I think by and large, most of those in the construction field already probably meet the criteria for those processes, but certainly would be interested to entertain if there are opportunities to improve access to apprenticeships for any of these licensed trades. And then another thing that's been on my mind too, this is from my previous role with the department, looking at the new um, general contractor licensing process. And I know there's a whole bunch of exemptions that are in place for that particular license. I think it'd be worth looking at the appropriateness of some of those exemptions for a variety of reasons, competitive balance, protection of employees or not, and then also just like citizen protection. So I think that might be worth looking at.
Thank you, Director Strauss. Yeah, I think that kind of falls right along with Representative Teal looking at kind of that general contracting licensing process as well with those exemptions. Any secondary input on those topics brought up by Director Strauss? Okay. Senator Noland.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I brought up at our first meeting about some of the concerns we had. So I'm hoping as we're moving forward, we can look at if somebody's, and I'll use the example of a contractor and a developer specifically with, they need to know the rules and they need to know what can be done. Can the board suspend somebody, put a higher bond, make them, when they abuse the system and hurt the folks, like they put water and sewer lines in, they have a contract, then they botch it, and then they botch it again, then they do another job and botch it again, do another job. So 3 times these people have done that. And then so do these boards have authority, or do they need the authority? Do we need to give them so that they can say, you're not following our rules? Some of the county commissioners say we can't do anything with them. They're the lowest bid. And I go, yeah, well, they botched it. You guys should be able to make them pay a higher bond. But they say at this point, there isn't anything like that. So if I'm missing something there, I'd like us to figure out how we can address some of those kind of issues from our couple different county commissioners that have been frustrated with, they award these and then there's no way to hold somebody accountable, because it hurts a whole bunch of folks because roads are tore up and then people fall in the holes because the guy just didn't do his job right. And we got some cars stuck. And so anyway, I wanted us to give these other contractors an option to, hey, the board can do this if you don't play right.
Yeah, thank you, Senator Nolan. I think that is a very important issue to talk about in this group is the enforcement aspect. I think as we're trying to find efficiencies in these programs and these licensing groups, I think we owe it to the good actors to have enforcement as efficient as we can as well. And like you said, if there needs to be some authority giving more to the board or clarifying that authority. I think that's a very good topic for this group. So, any further subcommittee topics we'd like to add to our working plan here? Yeah, Bob Dean.
So a few things on feedback from different organizations around. There are actually people that are looking that don't currently have licenses, that are potentially asking to become a licensed occupation. Various different reasons for that, but I believe that would be a task, an issue we could look at to determine if it's a necessary. It's definitely wanted in some aspect, but if that's something we want to tackle with this and almost do the opposite of what he has tasked us with, by having more licenses out there, but at least entertain and talk about it in that aspect.
Yeah, thank you. I guess I'd like a little bit of input from other subcommittee members on that. I think if the state overall is missing a licensing group that we feel needs to be regulated or needs to be brought into this fold, I have no problem hearing about that and having that discussion. But I'll listen to what others' input is on that. Any other thought on that? Jason Small?
Sorry, this isn't exactly that. It was a couple more ideas. Sorry.
Okay. I'll put you on pause there for a minute. Does anybody on the subcommittee have an issue with if we have some public comment or some insight on different licensure groups that are looking at gaining a licensure?
I was just curious if Mr. Dean had an example of this. I'm not familiar with somebody that's doing something that says, "Man, I sure wish we were regulated and required to have licenses."
Yeah. Yeah, Mr. Dean.
Yeah, so there are a couple of different categories. The main one coming from some general contractors. And then I'll use us for an example too. So we have a sheet metal program that we do, and they follow the same apprenticeship protocol that the plumbers go through. Um, Same number of books, OJT hours, all the things that align with the plumbing apprenticeship, our sheet metal people go through. But at the end, all they get's their certificate of completion for the apprenticeship. And then there is no chapter under Title 37. It's been repealed for sheet metal workers. Now, I'm not saying that's the direction that my guys are looking to go. But feedback from some of the general contractors is I think they feel that their guys would like to have something at the end of doing a construction apprenticeship for carpentry, or whatever training they're doing, have something of value to them at the end of that.
Thank you, Mr. Dean. Any other comments on entertaining some discussions around if there's a group looking to gain licensure?
I have to apologize. My link, this is John Harding from Great Falls. My link was not functioning, and I finally just got into this dang meeting. So,
well, welcome. Thank
Aaron,
you, Mr. Harding.
I called Erin 3 times to get on whatever link she was sending, just wasn't working. So, not sure how much of the discussion I missed, but it sounds like construction was part of the discussion recently.
Yes, yeah. Yeah, so we're still on member topics. Right now we're just talking, Mr. Dean had brought up that there's possibly a couple professions that would actually like to seek licensure to get some regulations in place for profession. One of those being kind of the sheet metal workers and HVAC folks. So I was just opening it up to the subcommittee on their thoughts of entertaining those conversations, because it kind of falls into a little bit of a gray area, as far as where we're at with executive order around this task force. So. Any other comments on that?
Well, I don't think that the residential construction communities, we've just recently gone through the process of changing from a contractor registration to a contractor license. Department of Labor is still working on some of the paperwork or some of the language of what that's going to look like when it's all taken care of. There's not a lot of interest in our industry to add ongoing education or additional requirements for licensing. And as you were just mentioning, as far as the governor's thoughts, is he probably was looking not to add that type of additional regulation at this point.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, and that's why I kind of wanted to open it up to the group here. I think we'll see how our workload goes, and if time allows, and that's something we can do, we'll possibly touch on it then. And to those groups looking, if it's something that doesn't happen in this task force, they can obviously always come to the legislature and try that process as well. So, any other member topics that we want to add to our work plan here? Jason Small.
All right, thank you. I'd first like to touch on Senator Nolan's topic there real quick. The state of Idaho has implemented a program where they take bad actor contractors from over there and then they preclude them from being able to work there. So it's my understanding that probably your area in particular absorbs those contractors. So they're all working in Montana in your neighborhood at this point. So that may be something worth looking at in this state also. And then I may be out of order yet on this, the other topic I was going to bring up, but name of the game here is expanding participation in apprenticeships. And frankly, a lot of our apprenticeships don't thrive because we don't have the work. I'd like to bring up one more point. In several of the other states, there's an automatic 5% tacked on to out-of-state bids when they come in on these projects. And that helps to regulate and put the local people to work and give local contractors the ability to actually thrive a little bit. So we might want to look at something like that as far as being able to implement that to utilize our ability or to basically make it easier for us to bring in more apprentices.
Thank you, Jason. Any comments on those two items that Mr. Small brought up? Senator Nolan.
I need to give a rebuttal, I think. No, I'm just kidding. I would like to say that what Jason brought up is probably, I've heard the same thing. Why don't you do this like other states? When someone's a bad actor, don't let them bid. In our state, lets them bid, and we have to take the lowest bid. So when I looked into it, and I'm still trying to get some more research, but what the counties are telling me, they can probably do a higher bond so that they can say, so Jason, if you have input on that, if they normally a bond is $300,000 on a project like that, and I said, well, hey, it cost $1.2 million to fix it. And maybe the bond, you guys, the bond could be up. But as far as the apprentice, I agree with what Jason's saying, that maybe we should, look at that just a little harder.
Thank you, Senator. Mr. Dean.
I am going to second and or third those comments on getting the work in order to add more And for the betterment of the people of Montana, we need to have the ability to get that work and keep that in front of them. So I agree that that is a very good time.
Thank you, Mr. Dean. Further comments? Back to Senator Nolan.
Sorry about that. Jason, thank you, Mr. Chair. You brought up 5%. What else have we heard across different states? Is it 2%, 5%, 8%, or 10%? Jason, 5% sounds pretty reasonable to me, but I think we need to look at that. I think we need to see what's a good number for these out-of-staters having to pony up more so that we can keep our programs going and apprentices. But I don't know if you said 5%, and I don't know if is that the number, or just you heard that in Idaho or Colorado or wherever it was, and if we need to research that to see, because we do want our Montanans working. That's the whole goal of this program.
Back to Senator Nolan. Yeah, that's the one I'm familiar with. I don't know where it sits across the board, but that's been brought up on multiple occasions. So I don't know exactly where the magic number would sit, but I mean, that seems to be a legitimate first step.
Yeah. Aaron, is there any good resource or any good way we could kind of look at some comparables around that?
So Mr. Chair, are you guys talking about prevailing wage?
We're talking about an automatic percentage increase to bids from out-of-state contractors.
So can I, just for a little more clarification, would this be for any bids from an out-of-state contractor to a private company or for state contracts? So
I'll kick that to Mr. Small brought this up, so.
And I see Quinlan just put his camera on, so I'm sure he's gonna help me out here.
Yeah, we'll probably get the real answer here in a moment, but I'm just familiar with like public contract and stuff like that. So, but I don't deal in bidding out of state work, so I'm not exactly sure. But there'll probably be people in public comment later too that can also address it that probably do have quite a bit of experience.
I think we can find some information on how other states handle prevailing wage with public contracts and public works. There is an apprenticeship component in our prevailing wage laws. There is some apprenticeship tied to our prevailing wage laws. We do have the bona fide Montana resident component in ours as well, which may or may not be unique to Montana. But keep in mind that it has to do with state public works contracts. So Quinlan, if you want to provide more color, please do.
Yeah, so I just wanted to add in that the prevailed rate applies to any public agency in the state that's letting a contract for construction services. That's state, county, local, would all be covered by ours unless there's federal money involved, and then we're in federal Davis-Bacon land and all that fun stuff. That being said, I don't know that it's particularly related to occupational licensing. It is certainly related to construction, but on the occupational licensing aspect, I think it'd be tougher to make a specific tie there for purposes of what this subcommittee is focusing on. And then thing three, I suppose, adding to that is that local governments make their own procurement rules. So the rate setting and the wage setting under prevailing wage is certainly set by the state statute and the adopted prevailed rates. But the procurement rules surrounding local governments are much more in the control of the local governments and what they want to do. I don't want to opine on whether you could, yeah, and I see Kelly is raising her hand, and can speak much more than I can to the local government contracting process. Binding, I think, local governments to the state procurement process might be a whole other ball of wax that I would suggest is also not occupational licensing.
Yeah, thank you. Mr. Harding, did you have some comments on this?
Yeah, just one. So the state of Montana does have a 1% gross receipts tax. It's not significant, but it's been in place for a long time, and that was probably put into our law maybe 30 or 40 years ago, because it's been around as long as I can remember. But the intent of that back then was exactly that. So the 1% is refundable to Montana contractors, Montana residents. And if you're from out of state, it's not refundable. It's not a significant amount, but it's something. And then secondly, you might get some blowback for sure from companies like QWIT that have done a bunch of work in Montana that come from Texas. When you start dealing with public projects that get into the tens and hundreds of millions, 5% is a significant amount.
Thank you, Mr. Harding. Ms. Lynch.
Sorry, struggling. Thanks, Mr. Chair. I think for the most part, our local governments track pretty closely with the state procurement requirements, Title 18. There might be some exceptions to that. I'm happy to go through and get you details if you want to know about them, but I think generally we follow what the state does. And part of that is because we are able to work with the state to get better discounts as well. So we track with the state pretty closely.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. I think that'd be valuable, just to kind of see what's happening out there at the local level, if you don't mind getting that for us. Senator Nolan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Regarding Mr. Harding, that 1% that was put in many years ago, maybe since we are growing and we are doing lots of work and we're trying to keep it Montana as much as possible, maybe in our discussion and those who have been around and somebody who might be talking later, if they've had experience in that 1% now up to 10 million, and then when it hits 30 million or 50 million, or excuse me, maybe it would be 5% up to 10 million, and then once it hits 30 or 40 or 50 million, it drops back down to 1%. Anyway, I'd just like to get those talking points and some ideas out there as well, because I think any options we can, and we don't want to exclude people from out of state. That when Montanans, here's what I'm hearing: Montanans, you can't do this. Our company can come in and do this, and we'll do it fair. And okay, we don't want to penalize. We want the jobs. We need it. I'm talking specifically roads, but there's some other issues too. Let's help Montanans as much as we can, but don't hinder us. If it's a percentage thing, maybe we can do it. We can work around it that way.
Yeah, thank you, Senator Nolan. Any other input on that topic at all? Seeing none, we'll kick it back to any topics from the subcommittee members that they would like to discuss in this group. One more call for any subcommittee member topics they'd like to bring forward to the group. All right, seeing none. Aaron, will you lead us through the review of the executive order initiatives?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. So the second page of the initiatives and priorities worksheet that I sent out to everybody on Wednesday lists basically the call of the executive order. So in the executive order, there are two main things that the task force needs to that is the purpose of the task force, and that is identifying and removing burdens and barriers faced by licensees that are not necessary to protect the public, and improving access to and availability of professional services for citizens across Montana, including rural communities. So in order to do that, the task force needs to provide recommendations that answer several questions. And so what I'm asking each subcommittee to do is really look through these questions and decide as a group which of these actually apply to the subcommittee. And you can see that I've gone through on this table and I've kind of started for the conversation for you what I feel could apply to the construction subcommittee, and what I don't think applies, and there's some blanks. And so this is just to kind of get the conversation started for you, but it's your subcommittee, and so you can choose whether or not you think that these work. And this doesn't mean that you have to provide a recommendation for each one of these, but just this can help as you go through your work in the next few months. And so, for example, as you're looking at these topics, you can keep in mind whether the unregulated practice of an occupation or profession creates a direct, immediate, or foreseeable hazard to the public health, safety, or welfare. And so, as you were talking about potential occupations that could maybe need to be regulated or licensed, you could answer that question. And so that may end up being a recommendation if you do have time to work on that. If there's a public benefit provided by licensure, I put yes. If licensure significantly increases the cost of the service to the public, that is something that you should keep in mind as you're going through your work. The next four I have blank as far as scope of practice for a profession, if it's readily identifiable and distinguishable from the scope of practice of other professions and occupations. The committee should talk about that and decide if that's something that you should keep in mind. The next one is if an occupation or profession requires a specialized skill or training for which nationally recognized standards of education and training exist. I left this blank because you guys are the experts in your fields for trades and professions. And so I don't know if there are national standards. I mean, I kind of know, but I want you guys to answer that question. If qualifications for licensure are justified, if what we have in statutes as far as the qualifications for each of these professions is actually justified, or if there maybe are some that are in statute that don't necessarily need to be there anymore, that are no longer relevant. If there's unnecessary barriers to entry that exist for applicants. I know we have a barriers subcommittee, but this should probably be a question that everybody kind of thinks about. Whether existing license requirements contribute to workforce shortages or access constraints in rural frontier communities. I put yes for that one because I feel like everybody's going to want to talk about that. Whether licensure portability, reciprocity, or endorsement pathways could expand access to qualified professionals, particularly in rural and underserved areas. You guys can maybe look at that one. You can talk about it. If licensing structures are aligned with state and federal rural health transformation initiatives, this is a no because that one's more for the healthcare committee. If public support exists for continued licensure for each profession, this is where you're going to listen to your stakeholders and really take the feedback from them on if there's public support. And then the last one is the sunset review. So there were some clear no's, there were what I felt were some clear yeses, and there were some maybes. And so with that, I'll leave it up to the committee to discuss, and I'll send it back to you, Mr. Chair.
Yeah, thank you, Aaron. So let's start with that first blank that we have. If the scope of practice for profession is readily identifiable and distinguishable from the scope of practice of other professions and occupations, do we feel that is something that this subcommittee should tackle? Any input on that? Seeing none.
Well, I guess
Commissioner
I gotta understand what all are we looking at? Is there overlaps between an architect and a landscape architect? Absolutely, there's overlaps. Is there overlaps on engineering, surveying for design purposes and land surveying? Yes, there's overlaps. But I mean, holy smokes. I could take you guys down a rabbit hole, but I don't know if you guys want to spend hours and hours in a rabbit hole that I don't know if we get out of either.
Yeah, I don't think we want to get too far into the weeds in that. I think a lot of what'll drive that discussion will be stakeholder input or public input on if they feel that those overlaps are causing a rub, and there's a need for that that sort of separation. That's kind of how I think of it. Other input on that, Mr. Small?
Yeah, so I mean, as you've witnessed probably several times already, also, anytime there is a pretty serious rub, it seems that whoever is affected by that generally comes to the legislature and tries to implement or clear it up via legislation. So, that may be something that we don't necessarily have to deal with, and it'll just be taken care of on a case by case basis as they come in.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Small. Senator Nolan?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So with that comment, Troy, one of the things we're trying to be careful of how we, goes back to picking winners and losers, basically. But we want, if there's too much overlap, if there's too much, somebody says, hey, I don't need to do that. Here's where I'm trying to look at. You don't need to be regulated if you don't need to be regulated. I would love to get away from a bunch of this stuff, but we've seen where if we don't protect the electricians, if they, we don't want to burn somebody's home up, we don't want to have somebody get electrocuted. Same with plumbing. I mean, we go down the whole list, but there seem to have been, from what we have heard, all these sessions that I've been involved, there is overlap. And I don't know, you're right, I don't know how much we dare get into trying to fix this stuff. But if we something in the public that's going to comment later has some specifics, I'd like to hear that. I don't know that you and I and a few of us can figure it out, but if there's something that's really a heartburn for somebody and we can not deregulate, but minimize that regulation, that's where I'd like to go with this and see if there's something, okay, we don't need this, okay, take that out. Plus it shows that we are trying and we're listening. Thank you.
Thank you. Jason, did you have something else? Okay. Aaron, are we on the right track with these questions? Is that kind of is this the format we want to be going through?
Yeah, yes, Mr. Chair, I think that's fine. You don't have to make any decisions on this. This is definitely just the first conversation. This is the organizational meeting. This was more just I wanted to have this in front of you today, and so you can keep this kind of in the back of your mind. If you don't want to make a decision on it today, you don't have to. This one, why I left it blank is because it's kind of a gray area. It may become more apparent later on if the committee wants to actually address some of the scope of practice topics.
Okay. Yeah. Thanks for that clarification. Yeah, I think, this entire list here, I think is kind of stuff that we need to keep referencing back as the specific issues get brought up. Probably trying to do it as an overall might be a little too burdensome. So, any other comments on that? If not, I think we'll move on to our next agenda item. Any other comments on that? All right. Identifying our...
Mr. Chair, John Harding has his hand up.
Oh, sorry. Mr. Harding. You're muted.
I just wanted to comment on Senator Nolan's thoughts that he's on the right track with that. I think that I was bored one night and I read through most of that Title 37. I think there's 72 trades that were listed in that particular document. I read for sure through everything that affected the construction industry. What I would like to hear, I mean, when I read through most of what I read through, first of all, the stuff that I don't understand, and his idea of going down the rabbit hole is significant because most of us don't understand what's going on, especially we'll go down to the simple one, midwives or something like that. And I know that we've got the other committee that's working on a number of those, but it would be I would like to hear from the folks that are negatively affected by some of what we're deeming to be potentially over regulation. And maybe it's the public, and maybe it's the people that are involved on this committee. But that's where I would like to hear how you could take a few pieces of whatever's in the existing licensure process and maybe eliminate some of those burdensome parts.
I agree. Thank you, Mr. Harding. Any other discussion on those questions overall and kind of the format where we're going to keep those in mind as these different topics arrive? Okay. Next, we'll move on to identifying our top priorities. And this early on in the process, I think that especially after we hear some public comment today, our priorities may change, but kind of based off of our subcommittee member topics that have been discussed today, and some of the ideas that are on our spreadsheet that Ms. Sullivan just showed us. Is there any glaring ones that rise to the top of the pile for you guys that you feel we should kind of put at the top of our working list? Representative Teal.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just looking at that list of the member topic ideas, just in terms of what's most impactful, perhaps workforce availability would be one that should be a priority. I mean, I think a lot of different groups are suffering from not enough workers. Thank you.
Thank you. I agree that kind of ties into several different topics that were brought up. I think that ties into apprenticeship and quite a few other areas that were brought up. So, any other ones that folks would like to elevate to our top priority list? I really think that enforcement should be a topic that we kind of elevate. It seems from my legislative experience, lots of the times when we have disputes that come before us, it has to deal with some sort of enforcement. They feel enforcement wasn't fair. They feel that enforcement wasn't taking place, stuff like that. So I'd really like to have a good, thorough discussion around enforcement, ways we can make the process clear, we can make it fair across the board, and show that it's effective. Any other ones we'd like to elevate to our priority list? And like I said, this list will ebb and flow, but just to get some work going for the next meeting, we kind of need to identify some first topics to dive into. Senator Nolan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So, Aaron, if you can enlighten us maybe a little more on if qualifications for licensure are justified. Was that I could mention a whole bunch of different things, but I don't know where we should go on that because it's pretty broad. But if qualifications for licensure are justified, I've had people tell me, why are you guys you're regulating this out? And I said, well, then give me some specifics so that I can address it, because you're just throwing something at me and I don't know what you're talking about. And if it's contracting, or it doesn't matter what it is, but I needed to know. And has anybody else heard what are the qualifications for licensures that are justified or aren't justified? That's, I guess, my question. I don't know where should we go with that one? Because qualifications, yes, but for licensure, are they justified? And I mentioned on our beginning, some of these things people are saying, we don't need to have this much regulation. You guys just let us do our job. And I said, okay, if somebody is managing this, then that's fine. And if we gave boards that responsibility, then that's fine. But just letting everybody out there like the Wild West, we've learned that didn't work. People get shot. So I was just wondering if there was anything else am I missing something or what?
Yes, thank you, Senator Nolan and Mr. Chair. So I think the idea behind that call would, and again, a lot of these can overlap with the different subcommittees, is if it's the least restrictive form of licensure, if maybe perhaps the certification or registration is a better way to go. But within the actual qualifications for licensure, if every one of them is necessary or still necessary, because a lot of these licenses, the practice acts haven't been looked at, the qualifications haven't been looked at in a while, and so they may have some outdated qualifications, such as good moral character. I use that example in another subcommittee. A lot of boards and occupations have gone away from the good moral character requirement because it's very subjective. You can get anybody to say that you're a great person, and so what is good moral character, or letters of recommendation? Who actually reads those? And so that's kind of what I meant. If the qualifications are justified, or if the hours don't align with that substantial equivalency like we talked about, and the bill that we passed, House Bill 246 last session, that allowed the boards to establish substantial equivalency. And so maybe there's some work that can be done to better align our qualifications with other states. So that, I think, is what the idea was with that call, if that helps, Senator Noland.
Follow up.
Follow up.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
But
well, kind of. So, when I mentioned a while ago about, or not in this meeting, but prior to this, I'd like to have everybody have to start over and tell us why they need. I called it, what did I call it? Anyway, justification. Let's just sunset you, and you have to prove that you need to be regulated or not. Then but we can't do that to every single thing. But if we pick 5 or 10 or 4 or 2, then we could see some justification, and then we move down the next session, because you can't do that to everybody. But I still would like to see. There's a few, and I guess maybe later I might bring those up if the public comment doesn't. Why we have justification? You shouldn't be regulated. Well, why? Because you haven't proven that you need to be, or you haven't proven that you don't need to be. That's probably more realistic. So that's where I was thinking maybe we were going. But thank you, Aaron.
And I will say, Mr. Chair, with your permission, I will just remind everybody that we do have the 4 different subcommittees. And so Senator Nolan's comments are wonderful for the Sunset Subcommittee. And there will definitely be overlap, but we should try to keep the topics within those subcommittees as much as we can.
That's the problem with me being on all of them.
I know.
Because I forget which one I'm
we need your expertise
talking about. Yeah, all right. Sorry.
Kelly Lynch.
Yeah, all this discussion made me kind of think about, which I think came up earlier, is the extent to which the kind of old 1970s, 80s process of paper and pushing paper and having, 4 people involved in making decisions can be, made better now, not just with electronics, but with AI. And to what extent can we utilize that as a way to make the process faster? So even if you do stick with the same, yeah, and I see Aaron smiling because of course no one wants to lose their job. totally get that. But is there anywhere where we can make the process faster by, if there are simple questions to be asked and answered, why does it need to go through a long process of, someone reviewing it? And maybe with the caveat that, you could go back and double check it, but at least the person's out being able to work until there's some reason they can't be.
Yeah, thank you, Kelly. Um, Aaron, on that, I guess to kind of piggyback on that, from a staff perspective, is there anything glaring with the licensure process uh, that staff could possibly recommend to us that they see could be improved, electronically, or if there's language in these processes that say it has to be a paper certificate, or is there anything like that that staff has? I know you guys look at it all the time, so just wondering if there's anything glaring that.
Yes, thank you, Senator Harvey and Kelly, for the comments. I'm going to give a plug and then I'm going to redirect. We have our Licensing 101 webinar next Wednesday at noon. You should have all gotten hopefully an email from me this morning with some information on that. And then if you're on the interested parties list, you would have gotten a Gov delivery notice about that. But Kevin Bragg, our bureau chief for licensing, I'm sure you've all met him or have at least heard of him. He is on the call right now. He would be best to answer that question. So with your permission, I will defer the question to him.
Yeah, thank you. Mr. Bragg?
Chair Harvey, members of the committee, thank you for the opportunity. I'll be glad to get some compiled lists off the top of my head. I'm happy if you take my job with AI. The difficulty with AI in reviewing specific things is that they can be forged and faked. And ultimately somebody has to make a decision even with the AI, but it certainly is something that can make the process more efficient. I think we have done our level best with trying to take out levels of review. At the same time, when you have, and I am not making a commentary on boards, when you have a licensing board versus a licensing program where a staff member could make a decision versus a board member, that can delay some things. The other requirements that I'll be glad to get a list compiled and then provide that to Erin so she can get that out to you. We don't need to belabor it today. But in specific, if you've ever looked at our independent contractor applications or our construction contractor applications, there are a number of qualifications that I am not saying are not worthwhile to look into. However, there's a lot of connections between the Department of Labor and other entities like the Secretary of State's office that need to be verified, and certainly streamlining those, which we're trying to look into, and making that process easier as far as the application would be beneficial to issuing licenses more quickly. But I will get back with the committee on a specific list of issues that our staff have identified, if that's something the committee's interested in.
Yeah, I think that'd be great. I think that if the law is holding stuff up from just being more expedient, and if there's some obvious stuff that staff is struggling with in these processes overall, I think that information is definitely valuable to this group. So, one last call for anything we'd like to kind of elevate to the top of our working list as far as kind of our priorities. All right, seeing none. Our next agenda item is outlining our plan to address topics and some instructions for staff for the next meeting. So we talked about workforce availability as one of our top items. Ms. Sullivan, is there some Is there some data you guys could present to us on what labor's been doing to kind of combat some of that? And any other ideas on kind of how we'd like to go about that?
Yes, Mr. Chair. So off the top of my head, I do know that the timing for this, actually your first two priorities is good, of all three, because you will have the benefit of having all three of our 101 seminars or webinars, they're not seminars, before your next meeting on March 27th. So we're going to have the licensing 101 webinar on March 4th, and then we'll follow that up the following Wednesday with Compliance 101. And so for the enforcement piece of that, if you're able to attend that, and they will be available online, and so you'll be able to access it afterwards if you can't attend it in person or on Zoom. And Quinlan's actually going to be hosting that one for Compliance 101. And so that'll give a general overview of the compliance process for licensees. And then the following week on April, I wish, March 18th, is Apprenticeship 101. And so our Director of Registered Apprenticeships, Glenn Disk, will be hosting that webinar. And so for just general background information on all three of the kind of main topics that you guys identified, you'll be able to get some general information on that. I can pull together some information on workforce, I guess, availability and apprenticeships that from our economists. I know they put together some really good reports. I would ask for a little bit more direction on exactly what you're looking for, specific occupations or areas would be helpful.
Is there some input on that? When Aaron's looking at data, is there any specific occupations you want her to pull data on as far as getting into the workforce?
Sorry, and if this is helpful, are you wanting to know like new grads moving into the workforce, or is this re-entering the workforce, or just expanding the workforce in general, trying to get people to move into Montana, any and all? Keep in mind, we have 4 weeks until our next meeting.
Okay. Any input on that? Senator Nolan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So, Aaron, one of my questions are how many people, and you might have given me this and maybe I've already forgotten, but how many people that aren't in the workforce that could be, should be, that have told us, and it's not something I like to do anymore. I want to do something else. This is my profession. However, if I could get some additional training, funding or whatever, I've had people ask that, hey, if there was something that could teach me how to do this, which occupational therapy or training and stuff might be, something that we could look at. But I don't, I have people that are saying, I say, you're not working. Why aren't you working? Well, not going to yet. And I go, well, you waiting for a pay raise or somebody to offer you more? What? I want to know why aren't you working? You should be working. You could be working. We have a shortage. That was in the health industry, by the way. But I don't know if that's something we have or you already have at your fingertips or what.
Yeah, I can look into the jobs report and see what pieces of what data points they have and what they look for, or what they ask in their survey. I'm not sure off the top of my head, but I will look into that.
Thank you. Any other input on data for staff? Representative Teal.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Is there any data or is there a way to identify which programs specifically are like having the most maybe hiccups or like the slowest process to entry or that kind of thing? Like, is there a way to identify which programs maybe need looking at the most to clean up some of this stuff we've been talking about? Thank you.
Representative Teal, can I ask a clarifying question?
Yeah.
When you say programs, are you talking about licensing programs?
Yes.
Okay, and then when you say have the most hiccups, are you saying like it takes a long time or it's a burdensome process to get licensed, or maybe have the most opportunity for reducing license qualifications or looking at outdated license qualifications, or all of the above?
I guess kind of specifically, just is there any data to point us to the programs that need looking at based on just some of the things we've been talking about? Specifically, what comes to mind is maybe like the longest processes to get up and going, like with the license. Like we were talking about, some of them get held up a little bit. Is there a way to like identify which ones take the longest to get through the process and get to working?
Yes, I think we can find that information.
Thank you. Further requests for information from staff pertaining to our topics? All right, seeing none. Aaron, is there some more clarification needed on instructions for staff for the next meeting? I know we have those 3 one-on-one courses coming, and that seems like it's going to hit some of our priorities. Do you need some more input?
No, Mr. Chair. So what I will do is, for the March 27th meeting, I will come back with the data requests that the committee has asked for, along with a proposed, like a draft work plan. And so we can review that. And then I believe the expectation is for the subcommittee to present its work plan, at the April 13th full task force meeting. And so one of the goals we'll have at the next meeting is to review that and then kind of sketch out the rest of our meetings. We have 5 meetings. You can see on that initiatives and priorities worksheet that all of the meetings are listed. And I'll do my very best to kind of pencil it out for you, but we'll tackle kind of an outline of what we really want to accomplish at each of those meetings. And so the co-chairs can best present that to the full task force on April 13th.
Okay, that sounds good. So anything else, Aaron, that we need before moving on to public comment? Okay. All right, we'll now move on to public comment. The subcommittee will now offer the public in attendance an opportunity to comment on any public matter under the jurisdiction of this subcommittee that is not on the current agenda. The subcommittee cannot act, but will listen and comment and may ask staff to place that issue on a further agenda. I, as the chair, may limit the comment period to proceed with, to make sure we stay on task here with our subcommittee meeting. As of right now, I'm not going to set any time limit on the public comment, with the caveat that we're going to try to wrap up the meeting at 3 p.m. To stick with our 2-hour meeting. So as far as public comment, please keep it to the point. And if there's folks from your same industry that are giving comment, and you just want to second that, please keep that brief. And that way we're not carrying on the same topic over and over again. So with that, we'll take the first public comment.
Okay, so first we have Keith Allen.
Mr. Allen.
Hello, just checking. Can I be heard?
Yes. Yep.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Keith Allen, Allen, Helena, Montana. Thank all of you for either volunteering or voluntolding to be on this task force. I went through the apprenticeship last century, and I am a master electrician. One issue is the login issue today. Ended up, if this helps anyone, or for next time, I ended up having to use a corporate account. I could only log in through the internet browser and not a normal Zoom account. That was pretty frustrating. I got texts from a lot of people that couldn't get on after multiple attempts and they gave up. So I don't think this meeting was probably very good for public participation. A lot of those people use Zoom all the time, and this one was difficult to get into. So maybe with the next meetings, there could be more instructions or better links to get in, since this is different than normal Zooms. I don't remember which one eventually worked for me, whether it was the website, the agenda link, or the interested party, but I used them all and finally got in. So I've been involved through the public process of the state electrical board since the summer of 1998. I've been to almost every meeting. The main problem from my viewpoint in my history is the lack of FTEs or full-time equivalents that does slow the process down. The state does need, I feel the state needs more employees in the Department of Labor and the Apprenticeship Bureau. We've greatly increased the amount of licensees and apprentices and haven't matched that with more FTEs in order to administer and help the larger amount of licensees. And ultimately, that can be dangerous for public safety. It is like the Wild West out there because everyone knows they can get away with just about anything, and that's not helping public safety. One problem with getting a license that I've witnessed is the communication between states. If someone's already licensed in another state, a lot of times you might hear someone trying to get their license and they're blaming Montana for the delay, but it's more than likely the delay in the state that they're from not moving quickly enough to get Montana the required info. Not much we can do to help that, but that should be known to the members of the committee. Going back to before the current governor, there's been wholesale streamlining processes to state statutes and administrative rules that were supposed to make everything easier to be licensed. And any hurdles I've seen afterwards were either on the administrative end or the licensee applicant's own end with their lack of documentation or their own home jurisdiction. So I personally feel there's nothing in Montana laws that make it harder to get an electrical license. If you've done an apprenticeship and you're a good worker and learner and you've been properly trained by your journeymen and employers, you should have no problem passing an open book test. I also feel Montana does a great job accommodating applicants that do have test anxiety and reading problems when they provide the proper documentation. So thank you. Have a good day.
Thank you, Mr. Allen.
Okay, next is Anne. And if you could say your first and last name, please.
Yes, my name is Ann Ross, and the last name is Ross. I am an electrical contractor out of Billings. My husband's the master electrician. And a couple of things just on workforce availability that we've experienced. We did spend a number of years traveling the Pacific Northwest, going after work because of the lack of employment opportunities in Montana for electricians. And the thing that would happen is, out of state, if there's a big project like at Intel microchip factory or, a data center, things like that, is that if they wanted that job done quickly, then the contractors would need to scale up. And in order to scale up, they would be putting additional money on the jobs. There'd be $100 of subsistence, things like that. And that would get the traveling workforce to show up and do the work. And unfortunately, Montana is, as a contractor, if the job's always going to the lowest bidder, and there is no advantage for in-state contractors, then these jobs are always going to go to out-of-state. And one of the things that we ran into a lot was that the out-of-state contractors would much prefer to just pay travel to their out-of-state guys and bring them into in-state jobs. My husband did get laid off of one job when he was still a journeyman for asking to see another electrician's state of Montana license. There was an out-of-state contractor doing work at a refinery. They brought in several of their journeymen from Washington, and those guys, in fact, were not licensed yet in the state of Montana, and he got laid off for that with retribution. So it's just thinking about the way that these things impact workers. And those 100,000 people that the governor references in his executive order, there are Department of Labor and Industry reports from Montana Department of Labor and Industry, I believe from 2021 and 2023, that reference that 41% of those are parents that have no access to affordable childcare. And I do know electricians, one in particular who's a single father. He has two kids that go to two different schools, and he has difficulty maintaining employment or taking calls for electrical work because he's restricted. He can't show up at the job. The job's 7 to 5:30. Well, he has to wait until 8:30, 9 o'clock to start because he has to get his kids to school, and then he has to pick his children up midday. So a true barrier is access to childcare. And another true barrier, I would say, for Montana contractors is having the edge over a very large out-of-state contractor that can ship their workers right into the state and take the contractor. So.
Thank you, Ann. Next public comment.
Okay, next is Teresa Clareman.
Teresa, are you there? You're on mute. I'm showing you're still on mute.
How's that?
There you go. There you go.
Okay, great. I'm Teresa Clareman. I'm a mental health counselor, but I also have a son who works for a contracting company. I have a few questions, and I'll just rattle them off, and you guys can do with them what you will. But I'm curious about this idea of an apprentice. If a laborman is working for another company or for someone else, is the license only applicable to the owner of the company, or do all of the workers under that person need to be considered apprentices? And is that what you're toying with here as far as, this idea of an apprentice? The next question was, are the rules different outside of city limits where the codes are different? Because, once you leave a city limit, building codes change, and it's different from county to county. And then also what Ann was hitting on, it seems since COVID, one of the biggest problems our state has run into is that all this building has occurred, and it looks like a lot of this is out-of-state companies coming in and snatching up these jobs and driving the price up. I think it was, I don't know if it was Senator Noland or one of the senators had asked the question about licensing and the necessity of it. In my own profession, the licensing is only about a quarter of what is required to be able to go to be paid. As a mental health worker, we have to meet the requirements to get on a panel of an insurance company before we can even get paid. So the license is just the first step, and if that's not met, then we're not going to qualify to get on a panel. And everybody gets paid differently. And I think when you guys are, again, I brought this up at the Sunset meeting, but I think it's very important to look at how these different agencies or companies get paid. Some are cash, some are paid by the state, or like myself, I get paid by an insurance company. And so if the requirements for the license are strict, it's probably because the insurance company has a higher standard. And then finally, this idea of having a board at all. One of the suggestions I would make that might help with, at least in my own profession, it always feels like the board is kind of out to get you instead of being there as a support for the person that holds the license. If someone is a bad actor and needs to be investigated or brought before the board, great. But oftentimes complaints are brought that are found to be, there's nothing to pursue. And in spite of that, the person holding the license has to hire an attorney, and it costs a lot of money, even if it's something that, they haven't even done. And the board just kind of turns a blind eye to that. So I don't know, changing the rules to, if the public brings a complaint or somebody gets in trouble and it turns out that they didn't do anything wrong, then it seems that the person filing the complaint should cover the costs. That's all I've got. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Teresa, for your comments and questions there. Just a little clarification there. It really all depends on the profession. There's lots of different apprentices in those different programs. They would meet a state standard to qualify for that apprenticeship. So it wouldn't be based on the employer directly. And then once again, this would be we're looking at standards across the board for the entire state. So there wouldn't be really any difference between in city or out of the city limits. We're kind of looking at the standards overall for the state. So next public comment.
Okay. Michael Jorgensen.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. So I'm Michael Jorgensen, Jorgenson. I'm the training director for the Billings Pipe Trades. We do apprenticeships for plumbers, pipe fitters, and refrigeration fitters. I'm also on the state plumbing board. I'm not here. I have to preface this by saying that I am not representing the state plumbing board at this time. But the biggest thing that I see with us right now, as far as licensure and getting people in, is a lot what Mr. Small or ex-Senator Small was saying about getting the work. I mean, I've got 60 apprentices right now. I could put another 100 on right now that are on my list, but we don't have the work. And going back to what he was talking about, maybe that 5%, the way Wyoming works it, and it's Wyoming that does the 5%. There are other states out there also, but I just use that as the baseline. If you put in a bid to Wyoming and you're an out-of-state contractor, you have to add 5% to your bid. You don't get that 5%. It's just added to your bid. So if you both come in at $1 million, you're at 1,000,000, 5,000, whatever it may be. My math is not very good. I'm a plumber. Being said, if we could get more contractors inside the state of Montana to get these jobs, we could put more apprentices on. And so that's the biggest deal. It doesn't cost that person anymore. It doesn't cost, the people here. If you have people in there close, then it's great. The other thing I'd talk about is I've talked to Commissioner Swanson quite a bit about these additional licensures, and we have talked about maybe getting HVAC contractors to be licensed. And the only reason we say that is because a lot of the new refrigerants are explosive. They are flammable. And so do we want people out there, putting this in saying, yeah, I got this in right now, a house burns down. Same thing with plumbing. We talk about electrical all the time about burning houses down, but I can tell you right now, sewer gas is very explosive. Sewer gas holds a lot of bad stuff. You don't want to be breathing it. So these are things that we need to control, and it is about public safety. And as far as I'm concerned, if it's not public safety, then it probably shouldn't be licensed. But doctors, plumbers, electricians, things like that need to be licensed. because we do have a lot of bad actors out there. And you know, we were talking about again the people coming in that don't know what they're doing. I kind of lost my train of thought there for a second. You know, you get the low bids, and the problem with the state is we have to go with the low bid. So I get 6 contractors that bid a job. They all come in at 100,000, and you get one at 50,000. Well, what did he miss? You know, but we have to take that 50,000, and then he change orders everybody to death to the point of he ends up making more money than had he bid it. Where I think what we need to do is look at how do we get in there and say, you know, if we've got 6 contractors and 5 of them are right in a small area and one is super low or maybe one's super high, you know, obviously we're going to throw out the super high, but why do we go with the low one? Let's make sure that they're not missing something. And that's just kind of my comments. I do think that we need more plumbers. We are short, but that's nationwide. But we don't lower the standards. We hold people to a standard, and that's another thing I would like to talk about. You know, we went to 2-to-1 apprentices to every journeyman, and we've been finding that there's first-year apprentices, which is a direct violation of state law, that they're by themselves. You know, they comes in front. We've had it come in front of the plumbing board where we've had 2 first-year apprentices by themselves. Their owner was in Missoula, they were in Bozeman, and he said, well, they're under my direct supervision, they can call me. That's not direct supervision. I don't know what, you know, that's like saying, well, I'm on the moon, he can call me on the moon. You know, at what point do you say direct supervision is direct supervision? I can walk over, if that kid goes down, I'm there to do something for him. And these are the things. So there's a matter of enforcement also. And I know this is really kind of outside the scope of everything, but it kind of leads into how many people we can get licensed by all this stuff. You know, it all ties together, unfortunately. So that's all I have.
Thank you, Mr. Jorgensen. Next public comment.
I don't see anybody else's hand raised, Mr. Chair. Oh,
Okay.
wait, sorry, one more. Jay Reardon.
Yep.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. I was waiting to see if anybody else was going to comment. My comments today are just not representing anybody, but just myself and sharing my background and experience as a director of the Registered Apprenticeship Program in the state for 4.5 years, and my knowledge about the construction industry. And, you know, this committee's focused primarily on licensing in construction. And as we know, construction is one of the fastest growing, you know, businesses and occupations where we need workers in the state of Montana. I don't have to tell anybody that's on this call that, because they have the experience in that. But opportunity also creates the opportunity for bad actors. And while we want to have the opportunity to create those requirements to create opportunities for more people to be engaged and working and get the experience in the construction industry, it's what you should be looking at. Yes, streamlining, but not reducing the requirements. I mean, by reducing requirements for these critical occupations, you're just opening the door for more bad actors to come into the state. You know, and then that puts the burden on legitimate contractors. They're doing their due diligence, they're paying the fair wages, they're doing workers' comp, they're doing unemployment insurance. And so what you need to be looking at especially is making sure that if people are in training programs, they're getting the proper training, that is registered apprenticeship programs, that they're being monitored to ensure that they're doing what they're supposed to be doing. And when they complete that apprenticeship program in a timely fashion, they can get their license. I know that's a hang up with some of the boards, and that's concerning. But as Mr. Jorgensen mentioned, in order to ensure that apprentices are not doing work unsupervised, we need more staff people to ensure compliance, that that's not happening. And there needs to be accountability. If that's found to be true, then that registered apprenticeship program should have their program suspended. Pure and simple. That's the only way you're going to get a handle on this, because that's some serious problems that are going on out there. So I would be happy to add any additional information and knowledge if you need it from me, just to share my experience. So thank you for the time today.
Thank you, Mr. Rudin. Any further public comment? Please raise your hand in the waiting room if you wish to give public comment. All right, seeing none. One thing I wanted to flag under public comment, all of the subcommittee members should have received an email today with some public comment from a member of my community here in Butte with the plumbers and pipe fitters. He actually went through and redlined and gave some explanations on kind of their section of law. As we work on our work plan at the next meeting, I think we'll try to incorporate that, at least a discussion on those ideas at some point in our work plan. Aaron, kind of based off of some of the public comment today, would it be possible to get, and it can have names and it cannot have names, but is there a chance we could get kind of some org chart on DLI licensing staff and staff that we have at the registered apprentice program, just so we kind of know what FTEs are there and what those job positions are.
Yes, we can definitely get org charts, and then I will confer with Kevin Bragg and Glenn Disk as far as names. Probably leadership names, I think, are we're happy to provide. I don't know about everybody down the list, but definitely we can get numbers and FTEs for you. And then I will just say, I will mention that in regards to the public comments that you received this morning from Senator Harvey and Quentin Queer, the Board of Plumbing is actually meeting next week. They may possibly be talking about this as well. And so just as an FYI, the board meetings are also open to the public, and the information on the meeting and link and agenda and everything is on the DLI website.
Perfect. Thank you, Aaron. Another question I had for information, and maybe some of the other subcommittee would like this as well, is there any type of definition, or if you could direct us where to find what the standards for direct supervision are? That was brought up a couple times today, and was just I'd like to take a look at that. So.
Yes, Mr. Chair. So I will probably pass that task along to Quinlan O'Connor, since that is definitely a legal matter for direct supervision. Oh, wait, direct supervision? Is that for apprenticeships? Sorry,
Yeah.
I was thinking
Yep.
active supervision. Never mind. I'll connect with Glenn for apprenticeships and direct supervision. So
Yeah.
sorry, Quinlan.
Yeah, I was just going to also add, I mean, it's the definitions of supervision are different based on license type, and
Okay.
they're defined by each licensing board or program as applicable, and then within the apprenticeship also. So as much specificity for who you're talking about would be helpful as we try to answer the question. You don't want 50 definitions of supervision, though we could give it to you.
Okay. Yeah, it sounded like today the comments were mainly based around plumbers and pipe fitters, and I guess Quinlan, while you're on here, how many different professions were included into that 2-to-1 ratio when we did that?
Sure. So that rule change was made in 22, I believe, and that applies to all apprenticeship types.
Okay.
It's not restricted. What changed was it used to be 2 journeymen to 1 apprentice, and it changed to 1 journeyman to 2 apprentices for the supervision.
Okay. Thank you. Yeah. yeah, I guess mainly plumbers and pipe fitters is what we heard today as far as that issue. So, just to kind of get an idea, I'd like to know what the standards are for that direct supervision. So, any other questions or requests for information from staff based off of the public comment we heard today? All right, I'm not seeing any hands. Aaron, anything we need to do before we close up?
No, sir.
All right. Well, as Aaron said, we have those 3-101 discussions between now and our next meeting. Our next meeting is going to be held on March 27th. So please feel free to reach out if there's anything you want to see at that meeting specifically, or in the meantime, if you have any requests for information from staff, don't hesitate to reach out. So with that, thanks everyone for your time today, and look forward to our next couple meetings and continuing the work. So thanks everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Have a good weekend.
You too.